Just to make it clear, this video is all about comparing the RTX 2080 Ti, 2080, 2070 and 2060 to each other, and kind of talking you through which one you should go with if you're planning on getting an RTX graphics card. This video doesn't cover 10 series or AMD graphics cards. It is only if you've already got your mindset on an RTX card, but you're not too sure which one you should go with, if you're willing to spend a bit more to get, say, the 2070 over the 2060 or 2080 Ti over the 2080 or anything like that. So that's what this video is all about. I should also mention that pricing is totally dependent on when and where you watch this. So if you're not in the UK right when the video goes out, then make sure you take a look at the links in the description, which will give you pricing, as I said, when and where you watch this, and give you a better idea for what I'm covering here. So with that out of the way, let's get into the cards themselves. Now, as I said, the cards that I'm covering are the 2080 Ti, the 2080, the 2070 and the 2060. The 2080 Ti is currently selling for around about £1,200, which is certainly incredibly expensive for a graphics card still. There are a number of options that are cheaper and a good bit more expensive, so there is a bit of a range available here. In terms of the requirements kind of thing, you will need a fairly high wattage power supply. The minimum I would really recommend for this is about 650 watts, although 750 might be a better shout, especially if you have a higher end CPU, but it requires two 8 pins at a minimum, and some cards I think on the higher end side might have an extra 6 or 8 pin as well, so just keep that in mind that it can be a quite power hungry card. The 2080 is the little brother to the Ti and is selling for around about £800. As I said before, there are cheaper and more expensive options available, so you can take a look at them as you fancy, but it's still an impressive GPU. It still also needs two 8 pins, but this and the Ti are the only two cards in this lineup that actually support SLI or multi-GPU in any sort of configurations. Personally, I wouldn't recommend SLI, especially on the 2080, but if you really have far too much money to spend and you're desperate for a little bit extra performance in supported games, then the Ti might be the one that you might head for. The 2070 is the even smaller brother, only requires a 6 and an 8 pins, so a little bit less power requirements, but as I said, doesn't support SLI in any configuration. These are still very impressive cards, as you'll see in a second, and are overall not terrible value for money, although again, you'll see that in a second as well. And finally, the baby of the pack, the 2060. This one only requires a single 8 pin, at least for my Founders Edition. Some other ones may need an extra 6 pin depending on their power delivery, but generally speaking, they are impressive value, at least at the time of filming, and offer some pretty great performance too. So speaking of the performance, let's take a look at just that. Starting off with 3D Mark Firestrike on the 4K score, you can see a fairly easy to understand step here. The 2080 Ti is a good bit faster than the 2080, which is faster than 2070 and faster than 2060, but they're all pretty respectable scores, even at the 4K benchmark. When it comes to Battlefield 5, testing at 1080p on ultra settings with RTX off, we're looking at, again, a pretty stable step with actually not too much of a jump between the 2060 to the 2070 and the same for 2070 to 2080, but a pretty big step up to the 2080 Ti, as you'd expect, especially with the price difference. In Dirt Rally, it's actually a bit of a flatter structure here, but again, fairly noticeable gains. Obviously, the main standout here is that the 2070 and the 2080 are pretty similar. Again, this is at 1080p on ultra settings, which again may vary depending on the resolution. On PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, again, 1080p ultra settings, we're looking at, again, a fairly easy step, although obviously the 2080 and the 2080 are actually a bit closer than you'd normally expect, but of course, especially with PUB, there's a lot of variability in benchmarking, so do keep that in mind. And the same goes for Fortnite as well, again, 1080p epic settings, and again, a pretty smooth curve with the 2080 Ti being the fastest and the 2060 being the slowest, although still, you know, not anything to scoff at, 133 FPS. A few quick things to mention. Most of the results you've just seen were at 1080p, so if you want to see different resolutions, 1440p and 4K specifically, then make sure you go check out my website where there is a full list of all of my results that I collected, including the minimums and maximums as well. And of course, a key thing to mention here is also the RTX performance. I did my testing with Battlefield 5 at 1080p on ultra settings with DXR on ultra, and let's take a look at those results as well. Now, as we've come to expect with RTX, you're seeing, depending on which card you're looking at, somewhere between just above and just below half of their standard 1080p FPS. All of these are still playable though, but it does take a pretty big toll, as you can see here. So now that you've seen all the performance results, let's take a look at the price to performance here. As usual, the higher end cards don't always do all that well here, considering that normally you pay a good bit more money for not necessarily as much performance, although we'll actually be taking a look at that in just a second. Starting off with the FPS per pound numbers though, the 2080 Ti is sitting at 0.145 pounds, or FPS per pound. The 2080 is sitting at 0.176, the 2070 at 0.244, so a nice increase there, and then the 2060 is, as you'd expect, the best at 0.279. These results are kind of to be expected, and as you can see, if you're just going for straight up best value for money, then the 2060 is the way to go. But of course, that doesn't necessarily take into account, different resolutions, as that is the Battlefield 5 1080p results and not necessarily any of the other resolutions. So which of these cards do I recommend for you? Well, it's kind of hard to say without knowing your budget, so if you are stuck and you're watching this video and you're still not quite sure which one you're after, then leave your budget for either your total system or the graphics card itself in the comments down below, and if you're willing to stretch a wee bit, then maybe mention that as well. But otherwise, generally speaking, the 2060 is a fantastic choice for 1080p gaming, and if you want to stretch to 1440p, it's not unimaginable. You can also go with the 2070 for 1080p if you want really high refresh rates, or if you're pushing 1440p and maybe even 1440p high refresh rates. Again, 1440p is a great shout for a 2080 as well. Again, high refresh rates and slightly pushing into the 4K side of things. And if you're on 4K full time, or especially 4K high refresh rate now, then the 2080 Ti is the only option I would recommend for you. Of course, as I mentioned, if you have any questions or if you're still struggling to work out which card you fancy, then leave that in the comments down below, and myself or the brilliant community here will do our best to answer your questions and give you help wherever we can. As I said, also, if you want to check out the cards and pricing when and where you watch this, take a look at the links in the description down below. That will take you to your local Amazon store where you can see pricing and all that sort of stuff. You can also check out the rest of the links, including merch like this one for a hoodie, or you can check out Patreon, which gives you great rewards and massively helps me out, and I thank all of the patrons who are already supporting me there. You can also check out the Amazon and Overclockers UK affiliate links. They don't cost you anything to use, but massively help me out when you do use them, and a whole lot of other stuff. There's Humble Bundle for cheap games that support charities, or private internet access, which is great in cheap VPN. Otherwise, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and check out the other videos over there, where you can check out the individual reviews of these cards if you fancy as well. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed the video. As I said, if you've got any questions, leave those in the comments down below, and we'll see you all in the next video.